Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
All right, hello and welcome. Thank you for listening to The Ron Show, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, or wherever you podcast. Honestly, have not been paying nearly enough attention to what's happening under the Gold Dome with the General Assembly in session. But one bill that is just one more vote and a pen stroke away from being signed into law, to me, is one of the more chilling overreaches by conservatives in the Georgia General Assembly. And with me to discuss that bill is Matt Scott, who, along with Sam Barnes, wrote a piece in the Atlanta Community Press Collective that exposes the fact that there's a bill that is literally just within a breath of becoming law that would expand cash bail to include some other offenses that are a little surprising and, quite frankly, to me, run afoul of First Amendment rights. But they also will criminalize charitable bail funds and actually could send repercussions throughout the entire bail bond industry. Matt, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ron. Always happy to be here.
So give us the story here. This is HB 60 or SB 63, right? Is that the one? Is that the number we got?
SB 63 was an expansion of the cash bail program that was introduced last year. It was voted on in differing forms in both the House and the Senate, and they commissioned a conference committee to come together and make a final version, which was, for the longest time, pretty in line with the already existing version. It was just an expansion of cash bail, and then at the last minute, on sometime between late Wednesday night, very early Thursday morning, they added a section that criminalizes the existence of so-called charitable bail funds, so like the Atlanta Solidarity Fund or Black Mama Bailout, or really, even your church getting together and bailing out, unhoused church members.
A GoFundMe, for example, could wind up putting you in jail for trying to help somebody who needed bail.
Yeah, they don't set out what the exact punishment for paying this. So if you pay more than 3 cash bails per year, right, you are in violation of this new law if it is passed. They don't explain what that punishment would be. It is a misdemeanor as laid out by the law. But, this is something that I think everyone should take very much, some pause and concern over, just in the implication of, we can no longer band together as a community and fight against, what I think everyone is willing to admit is a very unjust system. At least at times, even if you aren't an abolitionist, you have to agree that the cash bail system is, harmful, and particularly on racial lines.
Well, on racial lines, on income lines, personal wealth, it's anti-poor. It doesn't allow for any wiggle room. I mean, it's art. Listen, I tell people all the time, it's pretty expensive to live being poor in this country, and the room for error just isn't there. There's no wiggle room. And when you run afoul of the law in some way, if you just got stopped for speeding and said one cross word to a cop, you wind up in jail. And obviously, if you don't have the money for the speeding ticket and you are jailed, you may not have cash for the bail, which means you miss your job that you may have been heading to or have the next day. I mean, the snowball effects are pretty jarring. And a note that I wanted to point out in your article here, you point out that the bill only allows elected and appointed judges to even set bond in the state of Georgia.
Yeah, so currently, even in Fulton County, here in Atlanta and in DeKalb County, we have judges filling vacancy positions, and that's to help alleviate, the large number of people that we arrest and who need to see a judge to have their bail set. So this is going to add just another level of strain on that process by limiting the number of judges who can even set bail.
This is pretty alarming stuff. Now, I mean, listen, the expansion of ineligible offenses would grow to include protesting, unlawful assembly, obstruction of a law enforcement officer, which I just alluded to. Actually, the speeding, getting stopped for speeding, and I mean, we just saw a church deacon was actually killed by an Atlanta police officer. But if he had been charged with obstructing instead of losing his life, I guess there would be a different argument here. Street racing, reckless stunt driving, all about that. That's fine with me. I don't care. Lock them up. I realize kids are going to have fun, but you're a danger. Anyway, the expansion of these charges just seems to directly target people who wish to protest. I mean, this is anything from Cop City to civil protests, civil rights protests that date back to the mid 20th centuries, and of course we saw flare up again in 2020. Are you hearing any sort of pushback? Organizations like the ACLU looking to step up and fight this?
Yeah, the ACLU of Georgia sent out an email yesterday advocating for folks to reach out to their local elected officials. Southern Center for Human Rights also sent out an update yesterday. They also sent a letter to both the Atlanta City Council and the Fulton County Board of Commissioners, both of whom spend significant amounts of money lobbying in the Gold Dome in order to push them to fight back against this legislation.
We saw that the measure passed in the Senate by a 30-17 margin. Do you know, or do you have a sense if there's any wiggle room in the House that they might be able to sway some minds, or is this pretty much set as set in stone along partisan lines?
Yeah, so it passed in the Senate along partisan lines, with the sole exception of Senator Colton Moore, who voted along with the Democrats against the bill. But every other Republican voted in favor of the bill. We anticipate a very similar party line split when it comes down to the House. Perhaps with the extra attention that this bill is now getting, we might see some shifting, particularly in more vulnerable, purple districts. But it seems like it's going to pass. But hopefully, in the next few days, something could change.
Your article points out, too, that this isn't just a Georgia thing or a reaction solely to the Stop Cop City movement. This is happening across the country.
Yeah, there's a concentrated push, particularly in red states, with the exception of Virginia being a purple state, to in some way inhibit or outlaw charitable bail funds. In Kentucky, in Virginia, in Tennessee, in Texas, and I think Indiana. All of these states have passed some form of legislation either limiting the offenses for which a bail fund can operate, or requiring bail funds to register, adding extra, onerous fees on top of them. Georgia's particularly difficult in that, in order for these bail funds to continue to operate, they would have to register as professional bail bondsmen, and they still can't post bonds, cash bonds. They would have to go to a third party to attain a surety bond. So it's pushing more money into this cash bail system that is pardon the pun, but a cash cow in a lot of ways for quote unquote public safety minded elected officials.
Matt Scott joining us from the Atlanta Community Press Collective at ATL Press. It's atlpress.org, right? Do I have that right?
atlpresscollective.com.
There you go. I was missing the word there. atlpresscollective.com. So, Matt, put this into the scope of the civil rights movement, if you will. Can you imagine if these sort of laws existed back when Dr. King was roaming streets throughout the South and holding peaceful protests and being arrested for unlawful assembly, and his organization wouldn't have been able to have bailed out the likes of Dr. King?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a hard stretch of the imagination to consider that this might have been something that would have happened during the civil rights movement had it caught on to the extent that we see today. Of course, bail funds have existed since the civil rights movement, but they've really come into focus over the last few years after the George Floyd uprising and the hundreds of arrests that took place across the country, and really across the world in light of those protests. So, had it been as popular back then, I have no doubt that state legislatures and possibly even the federal government would have done some work to attempt to hinder the function of these bail funds back then.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I want to expound on that just a little bit. If you think about it, first of all, it was already detrimental to just about anyone to speak up for civil rights in the mid-century South, whether you were black or white. But the threat of being locked up without the opportunity to be bailed out, whether by oneself or an organization, again, affecting your ability to work the next day or the next week, would have really suppressed the support from not just within the marginalized community, but those who supported them as well during the civil rights era. You can apply this to women's rights. You could apply this to the LGBTQ movement and, their history of protest. It's pretty chilling how this just seems to be a wanton, willful attempt to suppress folks who are advocating for rights.
Yeah, that certainly seems how it reads to me. And, it's not just with this legislation. We've seen other legislation across the country doing things like if you get arrested protesting, setting a mandatory minimum stay in jail for that charge, or requiring a protest charge to appear before a judge. So really, adding these penalties for getting out in the streets and engaging in your First Amendment protected rights.
And I can't help but wonder, like, if I wanted to apply this to January 6th protesters who may have been locked up, and organizations or politicians like Marjorie Taylor Greene who would want to fundraise to bail them, this would apply in a similar sense if that were occurring in a state that enacted these sort of policies.
Yeah, certainly. And I would hazard a guess that Senator Colton Moore's vote was along those lines.
Yeah, that's that. When you mentioned his name, I thought to myself, well, now, why would Colton Moore be against this? And then I realized, J6. That's exactly what crossed my mind. All right, Matt Scott, Atlanta Community Press Collective. We'll include that article in today's show notes at ronshowatl.com. Thank you for joining us and catching us up on this important bill. And we'll remind folks to reach out to their state representative and let them know their thoughts on this bill before they vote on it. And it looks like Tuesday, right?
Tuesday is the next day that the legislature is in session, and we anticipate the vote to take place in the House then.
Matt Scott, thank you so much for joining us and catching us up on this bill. We appreciate you for joining the Ron Show.
Thanks, Ron.
So when you read about legislation like that getting passed, not just here in Georgia, but throughout the South and in a lot of red states, is it any wonder that there is a bit more skepticism and scrutiny aimed at law enforcement, particularly when you are of a marginalized community who has had to rally for rights? I mean, suddenly your ability to protest, your First Amendment right, is now at the mercy of law enforcement, which is an arm of those in power, no matter who is in power. And with a somewhat stolen Supreme Court, the judiciary isn't necessarily going to be there to have your back. Back after this, The Ron Show on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, or wherever you podcast. Welcome back to The Ron Show, and happy weekend to you. Gorgeous here in North Georgia. I'm getting in a hike tomorrow. I was going to do it today, but this pesky thing called a podcast, and it has to be done by 5 o'clock. By the way, I mentioned this earlier this week, and I'm going to keep reminding you, starting Monday, The Ron Show will first air 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. It'll be fresher then. Think about it as the greener banana. That'll be a little less green, a little more yellow by 5 o'clock when it airs again on America One Radio, at AmericaOneRadio.com and on its app. As the day goes on, something may break and I may have to update. I'll do that. I don't mind that. But what I do see myself doing going forward next week is not needing to stop my work as a residential real estate agent, a realtor with eXp Realty, call me, to have to stop at 3:30 to put together a show. I can do it after work, the day before, or first thing in the morning. That's probably more likely to be the case. I used to work in morning radio, so that'll probably be what I do. So starting on Monday, show airs 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. first on America One Radio, the app, and at AmericaOneRadio.com, and then the replay at 5 o'clock. Okay, let's get to this. This is Friday, of course, when I do the show for the weekend, and if you're listening Saturday, okay, it's the weekend. Friday's what they call the news dump day in the political realm, and I didn't know about that until I watched The West Wing. They always dump out the bad news on Friday so that folks who have divided attention doing other things for the weekend don't have so much time to fixate on the bad news. However, today being February 2nd, when it was mandated that Fani Willis and or Nathan Wade have a response to the allegations levied against them January 8th, that was supposed to happen today. Coincidental? I don't know. Consequential? So while this may feel like something of a news dumpy, slide it out so that nobody noticed this sort of thing, it was kind of mandated it was going to happen today. What I'm referring to, let's go to CBS News.
We are tracking some breaking news for you right now. CBS News has learned exclusively in a filing by Fulton County District Attorney's Office an acknowledgement that Fani Willis engaged in a relationship with attorney Nathan Wade.
Oh my God. Continue.
You, of course, recall that both are working on the Georgia election interference case involving former President Donald Trump.
Joining us now with more on Willis's response is CBS News investigative producer Daniel Kleidman. Daniel, extraordinary reporting. Tell us what you've learned here, particularly about how Willis is expected to respond.
Well, CBS News obtained a draft of the filing, the response to the motion that had all these allegations about her having a relationship with Nathan Wade, the special prosecutor who she hired to lead the Trump investigation. And first of all, it acknowledges that there was a relationship between them, but it pushes back very hard on some of the facts that were alleged, but also on the idea that this represented any kind of conflict of interest that could lead to her disqualification from the case or dismissal against any of the defendants.
And you have that filing in front of you.
I do.
What stands out to you? What are the headlines?
Well, one of the most, I think, important things in this filing is actually an affidavit, a sworn affidavit by Nathan Wade that is an exhibit. And I'll read it. He says in this affidavit, in 2022, District Attorney Willis and I developed a personal relationship in addition to our professional association and friendship. So there's the acknowledgement of the relationship. But importantly, he also says that relationship did not begin until 2022. My understanding is it's early to mid 2022. He was hired for this position by Fani Willis in November of 2021. That is an important distinction because of the suggestion that she hired someone she was having a romantic relationship with and someone who had come under some criticism for not maybe having all of the credentials needed for a case like this. They also push back on that, by the way. The affidavit lays out in detail his experience as a lawyer, including having done a lot of felony cases in both state court and federal court.
Do we have a sense at all? I know obviously this is all still developing, but what this could mean in terms of consequences. I mean, what are the chances that Fani Willis might step aside now?
Well, this is the question that everyone wants to know. And there's a hearing that Judge Scott McAfee, who's the presiding judge in this case, has scheduled for February 15th, an evidentiary hearing where he's going to have to hear some of the evidence and then rule on this motion. Look, the bar is high for disqualification on the basis of conflicts of interest. And this is the argument that Fani Willis and her team make here, that they had no vested interest, financial or otherwise, in a conviction in this case beyond wanting to do justice, beyond wanting to vindicate the rights of people in Georgia and in Fulton County. So the idea that the certain financial entanglements between Fani Willis and Nathan Wade could have somehow biased the investigation, they say that is not true at all. One other important detail in the filing is the allegation was that Nathan Wade and Fani Willis went on vacations together, Caribbean cruises,
Please, get to that.
lavish vacations, and that Nathan Wade paid for that from money that she was authorizing paying him for this job. And that was potentially a misuse of taxpayer funds, potentially added to the idea of a conflict of interest. What they reveal in this filing was that they actually alternated paying for some of these trips, and Fani Willis actually paid for some of them as well. And there are actually receipts for Delta flights to Miami that Fani Willis paid herself.
Georgia State University political science professor Anthony Michael Kreis on Twitter responding, if I were grading the Fulton County DA's office and their response to the Roman motion, today's filing an A-. He gives it. I would have liked more specifics on the finances and cost sharing. Can't say that I disagree with him there. Crisis communications, he gives them an F. The prolonged silence was not good, and divorce motion to quash was nasty. The indicted former President Donald Trump's Georgia lawyer Steve Sadow releasing a statement earlier today that says the Fulton County DA's response asks the court to turn a blind eye to her alleged personal and financial misconduct. Her sole objective is to try and stop the court from holding the evidentiary hearing that is set for February 15th. While the DA admits to an intimate relationship with her employee, Special Assistant DA Wade, she fails to provide full transparency and necessary financial details. Indeed, she says absolutely nothing about the so-called, quote, coincidence of Wade filing for divorce the day after the DA hired him. Most significantly and disingenuously, the DA attempts to explain and downplay her, quote, church speech by preposterously claiming that her racially charged extrajudicial comments were somehow not about the case or the defendants, and that her intentional injection of racial animus in violation of her ethical responsibilities as a prosecutor should simply be ignored. Apparently, the DA believes she can make public out-of-court statements about race, this case, and the defendant whenever she wants, and the court is powerless to punish her by disqualification. Such hubris for all to see. Oh, that's ironic. Who is his client? Nothing has changed. Our requested remedy remains clear. Dismiss the case and disqualify the DA together with her team and office from any related matters. Back in just a second.
Call or text The Ron Show anytime at 404-919-2725. The Ron Show on America One Radio.
So crazy that I had planned on a show that was just going to be singularly focused on a couple of topics, and then Fani Willis says, hold your beer. Actually, hold your beer. So I only get to give about 8 minutes to respond to the Fani Willis news dump today, and unfortunately, that'll just have to wait till Monday. Trust me, I've got plenty more to say about that. But I had already booked my guest, Dr. Matt Wilkinson, sociologist, good friend of mine from back in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm better than I think Fani and Nathan are, but I'm good.
Yeah.
So anyway, heading into the weekend with that on our heads, I actually reached out to you because I was just kind of enjoying how you're having a little bit of fun on your own personal Facebook page, enjoying the insanity that is the anti-Taylor Swift phenomenon that has just reared its head lately, and I said, I got to get this guy on. We have to talk about. Let's talk about something that's kind of lighthearted. This is really kind of silly stuff, isn't it?
It is. It's silly stuff, but I think some of the more serious stuff kind of comes through in the silly stuff. But I think that at face value, it's kind of so ridiculous and entertaining that it's fun to talk about, which is why I've kind of been having some fun with it myself. Also, as a now happy to say a Taylor Swift fan, I feel like I need to jump in. Wasn't at first, but became one after listening to, I forgot what it was, Folklore maybe, where she's just chilling with her songwriters playing in on a farm somewhere like that. So so I thought, okay, I want to chime in on this.
I think it's pretty interesting that we have two iconic Tennessee female musicians who are beloved by everyone left of center. And in Dolly's case, a lot of people right of center too, who just appreciate the fact that she's Dolly Parton, but they're both pretty progressive women, just not very politically active. And yet they're still loathed. This makes me think of Laura Ingraham telling LeBron James to just dribble and play. Well, Taylor Swift and Dolly Parton literally almost do nothing but entertain. And yet in Taylor Swift's case, because she's front and center and somehow impeding on our sports ball TV viewing, she's getting all the outrage. Is this political? Is it sociological? What is it?
It's actually, I don't know what percentage of each category, but I think it's definitely both. The sociological part of it is that, boys in our society, especially in U.S. society, are socialized essentially with one rule: don't wear pink. And pink is, kind of a stand-in for anything feminine. So Taylor Swift is obviously has an enormous fan base. I don't know what the percentage of women, but you see shots of her tours, and it's all of these women in sync, having fun, moving to the music together. It's joy, it's celebratory. Mm-hmm. And so it should just be boys, but it's also grown men. They see that as pink. I don't like it. That's how we show that we're men, real men in our society. I can't remember exactly who it was. I should have looked it up before the call, but the quote is masculinity is just the relentless repudiation of the feminine. So we're going to go against anything that's seen as feminine. So that's Taylor Swift. It's getting an education. It's doing well in school. It's wearing seatbelts. We saw it with COVID, right? I'm not going to get the vaccine because that's weak. I'm not going to wear masks. And so it's almost like some of these men go on autopilot, and in order to set themselves up as masculine, they avoid these things that are coded as feminine, often to their own threats to their own health and safety. And so I kind of like that perspective because it's a little bit more innocent than the political part, which is, oh, she's against Trump or she's against conservatives, therefore I hate her, and that's why she's getting death threats. So I think it's both sociological and it's political.
Yeah, it seems to just kind of be coupling at the same time. But to get back to the sports thing, like I grew up, and again, I'm a gay male, so it didn't really register with me, but I grew up when all the boys I went to school with had posters of the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. They were on TV a lot more, seconds per broadcast than Taylor Swift has ever been. And yet,
exactly.
Why is the reaction so different now?
And see, that captures the real difference, though, right? Is that those women, the cheerleaders, are there to serve the men. They're there explicitly for entertaining the fans. They are dressed for the male gaze. And Taylor Swift is not performing for the approval of men. She's performing for her fans. She is not trying to dance a certain way, wear her hair a certain way for men or for the male gaze. So some of these men will I don't get it. I don't find her attractive. She doesn't, quote, do it for me. And that means that she does not have value to them because she's not seeking their attention. And, I need to obviously say not all men. But you would think that real, quote, real men in our society could get to a space where they're comfortable saying, I don't get it. I just don't like her music. Anyway, let's get back to the game, as opposed to having such a strong reaction. That's what really caught my eye, is it's such a strong reaction to a super popular pop star. If you don't like the music, okay, not everything's for you. Right. Just let it go. There's lots of music I don't like, but I don't rage against it because it's not threatening to me and my identity. So I think that's what's really worth exploring.
We're on the phone with Dr. Matt Wilkinson, sociologist, professor at Coastal Carolina University. That's how he and I know each other. We ran some similar circles when I lived in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So I feel like there's this opportunity that's getting quashed, too. Like, this is an amazing opportunity. First of all, sports marketers would tell you that about 45% of the fannies in the seats at stadiums belong to women. But there's also now this opportunity for dads who like to watch football with their daughters who may not have been interested before but are totally interested now because one of their pop icons, Taylor Swift, is interested in football too because she happens to be dating the tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs. But the political part seems to be poisoning this opportunity. Am I reading this right?
Yeah, I think so. And, some men I think do see Taylor Swift being there is kind of invading our masculine space. This is our safe space where we can watch football and be men. But as you pointed out, 45% of the fans are women. And this is a chance to bring more fans into it. What is it about not having women present that allows you to have a safe space? We don't need these women invading our space. So you don't want your daughter to watch football with you? You don't want to hang out with your daughter or your wife or your sister? Why does it need to be a solely male space? And it's not, as you pointed out, but I think that there's that threat that this kind of men's club and this men's hobby and this sport is being invaded by women.
And I can't help but wonder, this is the thing that the whole feminist in me here wonders if this has something to do with dads seeing their daughter watching the game and seeing a powerful, celebrated, successful woman doing her thing and choosing to be there, not having to, but choosing to be there, as opposed to the subservient female who is on the sideline, either as the sideline reporter or, as I mentioned before, in the skimpy outfit, brandishing pom-poms.
Yes. She is there because she wants to be. She is there because she has taken an interest in football. And I heard someone say she doesn't even know anything about football. Why is she there? And I proposed surveying, 80,000 people at a college football game and seeing what percentage of them fully understand the game. A lot of us go just to be with the crowd, for the music, for the tailgating food, for the emotion, for the electricity. You don't have to have a PhD in football to enjoy the game. And she's learning the game and she's cheering on her boyfriend. They're this like the support that runs and the love that runs between the two of them is also something that's amazing. Why shouldn't we celebrate that sort of commitment and support? They're both killing it in their respective occupations. And, I love seeing the pictures of them together. It's like, we need more of that, like hope and joy front and center. And so I think, and to come back to the beginning of it, I think that's why it's silly is, is this a new type of hater? You're going to hate against that sort of love and that sort of commitment. It's a beautiful thing to see.
Well, and I can't help but point out that the party, from a political point of view, and you don't have to speak to this, but I will, the family values people, the moral majority, et cetera, and so on. Here we have a couple that seems to very much love each other and be committed to each other's successes enough. I mean, he's gone and appeared on tour stops for her, and she's gone to, as we know, several football games this season for him. They get along with each other. They love each other. They're not part of the NFL's recent issues of, bad relationships and domestic violence and things like that. This should be something that we as a society uphold and adore.
Yes. That's the contradiction, right? She is not merely a prop for him. And I think that makes some men very uncomfortable. She would be fine without him. And if they go their separate ways, she will probably write an amazing album. She'll be fine without him. She doesn't rely on him. And I think that's threatening to some men. But for the rest of the country and maybe the world who see this as these are two very powerful people who are very skilled at what they do, who are lifting each other up and supporting each other. That's such a great model for how relationships should be, I think.
This really does challenge some norms too, though, because I was sitting here thinking about it. Do you think that Travis Kelce gets ribbed in the locker room? Hey, it's Mr. Taylor Swift. But we have a female vice president, which means we don't have a second lady. We have a second gentleman. It just brings up all kinds of atypical norms that it seems to be rattling some folks.
Yeah, and he's, I have not watched football ever since the Saints and Titans started not being great teams, and I moved to South Carolina. So I knew a little bit about who he was, but he is certainly very confident in his masculinity. And, aside from her, like his celebrations on the field, the way he moves and dances, he is very comfortable and confident. So I'm pretty sure he can handle all of those criticisms. As you want to call me Mr. Taylor Swift, that's fine. I'm dating her and she's amazing. He's not threatened by those attacks, but there might be some good-natured locker room humor as opposed to the other type of locker room humor aimed at him. But also, I guarantee you his teammates see that he's happy. And if he's happy, that's probably affecting his mood and his performance on the field. He is in a happy, committed, loving relationship. And I think that true teammates and true friends will celebrate that, even if there's some teasing about her, being worth a lot more than he is.
Certainly interesting to watch this all play out. And, as we led the segment, the last segment, we talked about, a district attorney here in Fulton County, Georgia, who had been apparently having a relationship, an affair with someone who is now in the process of divorce. And so that's the ugly side of politics that we don't necessarily want or even sought to see from a personal point of view. But over on this side, we've got something happy going on. And yet either way, you've got folks that just cannot be happy with it.
Yes. And that's the part that is away from earlier. I said it's entertaining. That's the part that makes me deeply sad and concerned, is that there are people who are perturbed by this and they're irritated, instead of saying, I can assume what her politics are and they don't match mine, but seeing love and happiness and commitment and joy, that's a good thing that we need more of.
Right.
But if it doesn't fit into their box, then suddenly it doesn't just turn into that's not for me. It turns into hate. It turns into attack. Right. It turns into, at the extreme level, death threats. I saw that, she's had this exponential rise in death threats since certain folks started targeting her.
The basket of deplorables, I call them. So, and I liken this to like I know what Kelsey Grammer's political leanings are. And yet I was happy that Frasier got a reboot. I didn't really care for the product, but I was happy that the show got a reboot.
Right.
Can we just enjoy this for what it is and try and keep things in their lanes without people getting all butthurt about political views?
Yeah. Show some support. It doesn't cost anything to either be totally quiet. What was the thing? If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not for me. I'll just wait until the camera pans back to the sports ball. But it's so. I mean, not to make light of the word, but it's so triggering for some of these people.
It really is.
I saw it's like 40 seconds per 3.5 hour football game. She's on screen.
I think
it's not interfering with the action.
Yeah.
It's just a crowd shot, and they're irritated by her just existing.
Yeah. I think the crab cakes that they, have B-roll footage of during the Baltimore-Kansas City game actually got more airtime than Taylor Swift did. And you didn't hear anybody who may be anti-pescatarian go, how dare they show crab cakes? It is an affront.
Yeah, but vegetarians are like, I will never watch the NFL again because crab cakes appeared for 40 seconds. Right.
What do you make of the fact that there are warnings now from like Sean Hannity and Donald Trump, et cetera, and so on, right-wing media, for her not to step in and endorse Joe Biden?
I don't know who is advising, anyone on the left or the right, but especially the political right now, because if I was on an advising team or some sort of think tank, I would be saying, do not mention her, do not attack her, and ignore it, because by doing that, you're already kind of pushing the button to get her fans to turn against you. We've seen this. Every battle someone's picked with her fans rally around her.
Oh, yeah.
This isn't just a few fans, right?
Mm-hmm.
She has this probably one of the
army.
biggest followings of any musician.
Yep.
So why would you devote airtime or speeches, to attack her when she hasn't supported the other guy? And maybe she will, maybe she won't. But, she takes a stand on being pro LGBTQ or, women's rights or women's, right to fair pay. And they go after her. It's only going to more deeply solidify support for the other side. So I'm baffled. That is bad politics to try to go after her. I don't get it.
I was just going to say, when in an era when the Dobbs decision has been so far removed now that it may have kind of stunted the wound just a little bit. It doesn't sting nearly as much. Don't piss off women now with this going after arguably the most famous woman on the planet right now.
Yeah, don't mobilize that vote. Do what you will, but it does seem like pretty self-inflicted wound there to be so hyper fixated on her and warning her not to endorse. I mean, can she have a political opinion? Right? Is she not allowed to say that she supports her LGBTQ fans and friends and family? You need to be quiet about that because you have too much power. Are they suppressing her right to free speech? I don't get it. I don't think it's a good move, but we'll see how it plays out.
Don't disagree. Dr. Matt Wilkinson, sociologist, thank you so much for giving us some time and having a little lighthearted reflection on all things Taylor Swift here on The Ron Show today. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot.
Final segment of The Ron Show. Thanks for listening, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, or wherever you podcast. Hey, man, good economic news coming out today. The U.S. economy added 353,000 new jobs in January, better than expected. And before that even came out, you heard the likes of this from a former Trump advisor, Larry Kudlow, on Fox Business. This, if I'd have seen this last night, I'd have fallen out of my chair.
I was kind of enjoying.
Who else am I going to talk to about the economy?
My mea culpa, I was wrong about the slowdown in the recession. So was the entire.
I don't think you were wrong.
Forecasting fraternity. Well, the Fed, everyone was wrong. Okay.
Yeah, no, not everyone was wrong. Just a lot of leading economists and anyone on the right who wanted to believe that was going to be the case. Non-farm payrolls, 353,000 new jobs for the month of January. Better than what the Dow Jones estimate was leading us to believe it was going to be by about 170,000 jobs. Yeah, they predicted about half of what we wound up getting. The unemployment rate held at 3.7%. Average hourly earnings increased 0.6%, double the monthly estimate. On a year-over-year basis, wages have jumped 4.5% above the 4.3% forecast. CNBC reporting job growth was widespread in January, led by professional and business services with 74,000. That's important because that's not holiday retail. That's not temporary stuff. Other significant contributors included healthcare, again, permanent, 70,000, and then the retail trade at 45,000 new jobs. That being said, I'm always trying to warn the coastal elites. You hear that term on the right all the time. The coastal elites, they have no idea what the average person is dealing with. Stephanie Ruhle, after the New Hampshire primary, I believe, was on MSNBC and said something akin to being just openly dismissive about the way the average American family feels the pinch. Just saying essentially something along the lines of they're not getting crushed by inflation. And I cringed. In fact, I cringed and I grabbed my phone to tweet at her because I was like, no, you got to stop doing this. Because that's the sort of soundbite stuff that the opposition takes and runs with. And it really does kind of come off as elite. I said, Stephanie Ruhle at 11th hour, careful being not middle class, she's not, and insisting the middle class isn't feeling things in this economy, ma'am. That's how Democrats lose in this environment. I mean, shades of 2016. She responded, hey, credit to her for doing that, like within the hour, I believe. I did not say the middle class isn't feeling it. I said they're not getting crushed. Daryl Dominic in Metairie, Louisiana tweets, I'm middle class and way left, and I'm absolutely getting crushed. Higher homeowners insurance, flood insurance, auto insurance, higher cost of groceries, stagnant wages. I have cut back all I can in working more Sundays. I already work Saturdays. This is unreal. My 2 cents. I'm only bringing this up because it feels like we're setting ourselves up for a situation where we just gloat and coast because the economy is doing well. And it is by just about every economic measure, except that at the kitchen table, you hear Joe Biden talk about the kitchen table conversations, grocery costs are still high. The Washington Post reporting on that today and giving valid reasons as to why that is. None of them can be dealt with government policy. Grocery prices, they write, remain elevated due to a mixture of labor shortages tied to the pandemic, ongoing supply chain disruptions. Yes, the infrastructure bill we just passed into law is just now shovel-readying some projects that are going to help with that. Droughts. Joe Biden can do nothing about that. The avian flu, other factors far beyond the administration's control. Robust consumer demand has also fueled a shift to more expensive groceries, and consolidation in the industry gives large chains the ability to keep prices high, economic policy experts say. Now, who is all about deregulation and pro-big business? You guessed it, not the party controlling the White House. That's the sort of pivot that messaging has to include this election cycle. We know you're feeling it at the grocery store. We know you're feeling it when you buy a new set of tires. We know it when you're buying your goods at the department store, your house cleaning, your laundry goods. Yeah, we get it. We know it's tough. Competition has been stifled. For decades, it's not something that happened overnight, and it's not something that can be fixed overnight. But an oligarchy is taking over our economy and has been doing so for more than 4 decades. So, America, we need, I keep talking about this, we need that 8-year electoral revolution. The American Revolution was 8 years. We need an electoral revolution. We need you showing up this November. We need you showing up in 2 Novembers. We need you showing up in 2028 and 2030 and 2032. And then let's see where we are and what sort of policy we can actually put into effect that handles a lot of those kitchen table financial issues that you need to address. I get it. In the next 8 years, it's going to be tough. It just is. There aren't enough levers that the left has controls of to deal with capitalism that's run amok. But I also need my friends, the coastal liberal elites, to chill out with the, man, aren't things great? Isn't this fantastic? No offense to Stephanie Ruhle, but she wouldn't know. She grew up in a New Jersey suburb that has a 6-figure median income when the rest of the country is around $74,000 per household. No disrespect to Stephanie Rule. She worked her way up through the financial industry and landed at Bloomberg Television and has been making a good living at cable news since then, but there's some disconnect. Got to be careful with that. That's going to do it for The Ron Show. Have yourselves a great weekend. Back here Monday, 9 to 10 a.m. weekdays and 5 to 6 p.m. on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com. Listen anytime you want, wherever you podcast. Show notes at RonShowATL.com.